Hello, everyone. Please turn on your camera. Please turn on the camera. Okay, thank you. Okay, can I check the attendance first? We'll start from section Mango. Please say present once your name is called. Again, say present once your name is called. And I would like you to open your camera. Turn on the camera, please. Today is 12/2/21. Apita Zion.
Present.
I'll just make it best. Okay, very good. Thank you. Araba Mark. Mark Araba. Banaldia. Chad. Chad.
Present.
John David. Justin.
Present.
Present.
Strabo Lance.
Present.
Strabo.
Present.
Dick. Juno. Go. Dick. Go Dick. Hardillo. Ernest. Hardillo. Malinaw. Eugenio. Okay, very good. Christian. Marasigan. Christian. Alexi.
Present.
Jade Ogale. Jade.
Present. Present,
Carl
ma'am.
Carl Vincent. Yeshel Seso. Yeshel Seso. San Emmanuel Solayaw. San Solayaw. Marie Vincent. Erica Aberia.
Present po, ma'am.
Lorraine Abobo. Lorraine. Zoe Afable. Zoe.
Present. Present, ma'am.
Gail Alde. Gail.
Present po, ma'am. Present po, ma'am.
Ana Ambil.
Present.
Raven Amoyo.
Present.
Joyce Ampong. Joyce. Apura Julia.
Present.
Nash Astakaan. Nash. Angeline Colima.
Present.
Jan Antoinette Dator. Jan
Present.
Antoinette.
Present po.
Krishna de los Santos.
Present po,
Krishna.
ma'am. Present, ma'am.
Jocelyn Jolola.
Present po.
Jocelyn.
Present po.
Aliana Docena.
Present po.
Jillian Gapate. Jillian. Julia Guevara.
Present po.
Antoinette Lavado.
Present.
Maxian Marasigan. Maxian.
Present.
Maxian. Marasigan. Pronounce your name, Heart. Heart na sigurado. Debbie Menzon.
Present po, ma'am.
Isabella.
Present, ma'am.
Isabella. Okay.
Present.
Francesca Promeda. Jocelyn Puno. Sakmar Riz.
Present.
Angelique
Present
Suwal.
po, ma'am.
Angel Monroy. Angel. Monroy. Monroy. Okay. Araba Mark, are you there? Araba, Mark, John David.
Present.
John David present. John David? Oh, was that John David? Or was it Mark?
Mark po, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Dick, go. Dick. Bon, Hardillo. Bon, Panis, Carl Vincent, Cesar Yishel, San Emmanuel, Sulayaw, Uy, Marie Vincent. Okay, Warayha, Abobo Lorraine. Abobo,
Present.
Abobo, present. Thank you. Ampong Joyce. Ampong, Gapate Jillian. Gapate. Nastakaan Nash, are you there? Nakita ko na. Okay. Promeda, Francesca. Promeda. Puno, Jaslyn. Monroy, Angel. Okay, so go to section Santol. Joshua Abusejo. Joshua, present. Anyosa, John Joseph. Anyosa. Ari John Edward, Mark Kenneth, Bulanadi, Earl Joseph, Catalo,
Present. Present.
Earl Delantar, Kinita pa naman to. Andre Labro, Andre, Renz Rodolph, Lilia, Hans Lomar, Rosalejos, Raydel Samson, John Ray Traboco. Raydel Samson, are you there?
Present po, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. John Ray Traboco, are you there? John Ray. Abelia, Princess, Jane, Adamas, Kera,
Present.
Francine, Alea,
Present po.
Francine, Hannah
Present po.
Joseph,
Present
Hannah
po.
Amos,
Present po.
Denise Apura, Denise, Josel Faye Banario,
Present.
Andrea Beato, Andrea, Mishka Cepeda, Kiana Cecista,
Present po.
Jazere Doldolea. Also, this is a boy. Jazere, Dulfo Marian,
Present.
Marian, Cristil Factor, Cristil, Factor, Cristil, Denisa Fuentes, Denisa, Hyacinth Galupe, Hyacinth, Tricia Gapud, Angel
Present,
Nadine. Tricia is present. Thank you. Angel Nadine Garcia. Angel Garcia. Liana Gura.
Present.
Hazel Hilaria.
Present po, ma'am.
Shira Kirsty Habuli.
Present po, ma'am.
Charnet Latoja.
Present.
Jezel Mendoza. Jahara Montes.
Present po.
Montes. Jazel Padilla. Jazel Padilla. Jazel. Yes. Isaiah Pagayanan. Isaiah.
Present po.
Allison Pan. Allison.
Present po. Present.
Yeza Nicole. Yeza. Ninia Ramirez.
Present.
Ninia. Cherise Rijang. Cherise. Grace Love Sabido. Grace Love.
Present.
Okay.
Present, ma'am.
Ella Turla. Ella Turla. Ella. Okay, last call for section Santol. Joshua. Joshua Abusejo, Are John Edward, Bulanadi Martinez, Delantar Earl, Andre Labro, Renz Rudolph, Hans Lomar, Rosalejos, John Ray Traboco. Okay. Boys out of 11, only 3 are present. Abelia Princess, Dennis Apura, Beato, Andrea Joy, Misha Cepeda, Doldolea Jazzy Ray, Factor Cristil, Denisa, Hyacinth Galupe.
Present.
Okay, thank you. Next, Mendoza Jezel, Mendoza, Padilla Jazel, Padilla, Puno Yeza Nicole, Rijang Cheris, Rijang, and Ella Turla. Okay. So, be ready with your, what's this? Be ready with your pen and paper for note taking. Okay, so our lesson for today is Quarter 2, Module 4, Lesson 1 of Module 4 actually. The title is The Nucleic Acids, DNA, and RNA. If I remember it right, I think this is your application that you will submit as your performance output in Module 4. So if you have time, start making it because it takes time to make these models. Radel Samson, porque nakita in Robin Hood. Okay, so I want you to turn on the camera para nakikita ko kung ano ito mga istorya. Kita ko kung ano ito. Okay, thank you, Grace, Radel, thank you. Who else? Anna, Ghislaine, Ann, Jade, Tricia. Okay, thank you for opening or thank you for turning on the camera. Thank you for that. Okay, so how was the test? Were you able to answer it? Were you able to answer? Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Were you able to make it?
Yes,
Were
ma'am.
you able to make it perfect? Wari pa kasi
I'm not sure. Wala pa result.
Diri, God. Maram mong kabut ko na-cancer ka mo. Kaya ako na-take nga examine, maaram kong mapasar kong diri. Maaram libot ako kung wrong akong diri. Okay, so were there questions? Did you give answers that you were not sure if it was right? Kaya kung nagdududa ka, most likely wrong it is. Anyway, so just pray that those answers nga medyo nagdududa ka mo are correct rather. Okay, anyway. So okay, so we go to the introduction. Now, if you have a copy of the module, I know I was able to upload this in the Google Classroom. So if you can open the module, please do so. Please open it para makadungan ka mo discussion. So for the introduction, molecular biology. So we are now in molecular biology. Actually, we are starting genetics. So molecular biology is the study of the chemistry of molecules which are specifically connected to living processes. Of particular importance to molecular biology are the nucleic acids. So nucleic acids are actually very important in the topics of biology, in the discussion of biology. This is very important. The foundation of genetics is actually nucleic acids. Now, nucleic acids are actually biomolecules. They are actually macrobiomolecules. So nucleic acids are basically the DNA and the RNA. Both DNA and RNA are nucleic acids. DNA is a nucleic acid, so with RNA. And the proteins which are constructed using the genetic instructions encoded in those molecules. So this is actually the overview of what we call molecular biology. Okay, so we all know that offspring resemble to their parents. Do you agree with this? Offspring resemble to their parents more than they do unrelated individuals. Do you agree with this?
Yes.
Okay. Kung ano ang puno, siya ang bunga. Diba? As the saying goes. Okay. So this is true in plants and animals. The transmission of traits from one generation to another is called inheritance. So when we say transmission, inheritance or heredity, now when we say transmission, it is actually the transfer of traits from generation to generation. The transfer of traits from parents to offspring, or the transfer of genetic traits from parent to children, from parents to children. Okay, so the traits that you copied from your parents, or the traits that were passed on from your parents to you, you will pass it on to your children. Okay, so heredity is actually the passing on of traits from parents to offspring, the passing on of traits from generation to generation. Itong parents kasi, iba itong hirang henerasyon. Itong children, iba liwat itong hirang henerasyon. So the passing on of traits from parents to offspring is called heredity or inheritance. Okay, so from the Latin word eres, which means ear. However, sons and daughters are not identical copies of either parent. Do you agree with this? Sons and daughters are not identical copies of either parent or of their siblings. Do you agree with this?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. In other words, yes, it's true. Very, very correct. Halabangotse. You are not alike with your father, nor were you alike or are you alike with your mother. You don't look exactly the same. Okay? Kaya ano, you are a product of the genes between your father and your mother. Asya nga, you don't look exactly the same as your father, or you don't look exactly the same as your mother. Asya nga itong magburugto, nag-iiribaliwat itong hitsura. Okay, so there is actually a slight difference between or among siblings. Okay, no one in your siblings looks exactly the same as your mother or your father. So in this lesson, you will discover how traits are passed on from parents to offspring. So that will be the focus for today's discussion. Okay. Now, after going through this module, you are expected to. So we will be guided throughout the discussion. We'll be guided with these objectives. Everybody, please read letter A. 1, 2, 3, go.
Start the
Contributions of various researchers, scientists, in discovering the DNA of genetic material.
Read it.
genetic
Please.
material.
Please read it slowly. Ito nga, ginbabasa
Yes,
mo
ma'am.
mahinay nga naiintindihan mo as you read. Okay, can we do it, class? 1, 2, 3, go.
Cite the
Contributions of various
researchers,
researchers,
scientists,
scientists,
in discovering the
discovering
DNA
the
of
genetic
material.
In the genetic
material.
material.
components.
Okay, so letter B, Santol class. 1, 2, 3, go. Santol, are you ready? 1, 2, 3, go. For letter B objective. 1, 2, 3, go.
Identify and
Identify
the
structural component of
components of DNA.
Okay, so that is another objective for today's lesson. Mango for letter C. 1, 2, 3, go.
Describe the base pairing in DNA
molecules.
So another objective for today's discussion is to describe the base pairing in DNA molecules. And this is quite important. And I'm pretty sure this will appear in the summative test. So next, letter D, write the complementary base pair of a DNA strand, which I will let you do later. Letter E, everybody please read. 1, 2, 3, go.
differentiate the structure of the nucleic acids, DNA and RNA.
Okay, so this is very vital for this lesson. You must know how to differentiate, or you must know the differences between the DNA and RNA in terms of structure. And letter F, cite the importance of DNA in the transmission of traits. How important is the DNA in the transmission of hereditary traits? Okay. Now, for a quick review of the past lessons, actually the past lesson is actually very helpful for today's discussion. So number 1, control center of the cell. Hyacinth.
Nucleus.
Very good, thank you. Number 2, Grace Love. Grace Love carries genetic material. Alexi, yes. Alexi is raising his hand.
Chromosomes.
Very good, chromosomes. Number 3, okay, and I will call somebody from section Santol. Hyacinth, natawag ka na ano? Liana. Liana. Number 3, a means to generate body parts. Anybody from section Santol? A means to generate body parts.
Ma'am, cell division.
Very good, cell division. Thank you for that. Number 4, Jade Ogale for number 4. Producing exact copies of genetic material. Jade Ogale.
Ma'am, number 3
It starts with letter.
aking alam.
And number 4 actually starts with letter. Anong letter? Grace Love. For answer number 4. Producing exact copies of genetic material. Aadin hiya interface. So it happens in. Okay, thank you. Replication. Number 5. Number 5, Ambil. Anna, number 5, formation of 2 cells.
Mitosis.
Thank you, mitosis. Since you were able to answer all the 5 questions correctly, I think you're all ready for the discussion of today's lesson. Now, on page, what page is this? So there's a page in the module for terminologies. These are very important. All of these are very helpful in the better understanding of the lesson. Allele. Summary nga ni allele, allele or alleles. This is correctly pronounced as allele. Diri allele, ha, diri allele or alleles. No, it is pronounced as allele. Allele or alleles. Forms of genes responsible for controlling the same trait. Forms of genes responsible for controlling the same trait. Different versions of the same gene. Let's take, for example, the trait is height. The trait is height. So the different versions of that of height is the gene for tall. What is the opposite for tall? Raise. Sakbar. What is the opposite of tall?
Short.
Yes, very good, short. So tall and short. Opposite versions of the same gene. Opposite versions of the same gene. Both genes actually refer to the same trait, and the trait is height. Okay. Let's say, for example, color. Give me different versions of color.
Black and white.
Yes.
Black and white.
Very
Same
good.
color.
Black and white. Yes.
Blue and
Same
red.
color. So the trait is color. Tapos mag-opposite naman ng ira genes. That refers to a single trait. Okay, so black and white. Texture of hair. Texture of hair. Curly and curly and
Straight.
straight. Very good. Curly and straight. So all of these examples given refer to alleles. So forms of forms of genes responsible for controlling the same trait, but with a different version of genes. They're the same gene, different versions of gene. So chromosome, I think you know what a chromosome is. Now, complementary nucleotides. Nucleotides that pair with one another when strands of DNA, RNA are both pair with one another. Cytosine, guanine, adenine, and thymine replace the uracil in RNA. So when we say complementary nucleotides, these are the 2 nucleotides that complement each other. This is a part of today's discussion. So in the complementary, I'll just give you an overview. In the complementary nucleotides, I'll give you an example. Cytosine complements with guanine. Adenine complements with thymine or uracil. Okay, I think you know what a DNA is. Gene, a segment of DNA that codes for a specific trait or protein. Genome. Are you familiar with the word? The Human Genome Project. So genome refers to one haploid set of chromosomes with the genes that they contain. Refers to one haploid set of chromosomes with the genes they contain. Well, to make it simple, so meron nga na genome, this is actually the totality of all the genes in the cell of an individual. The totality of all the genes in the cell of an organism. So we call it as genome. So heredity, I think I made mention just a while ago, heredity. Histone. Histone is a protein where DNA is wound. So di na hiya ginbabind or ginwawind. Ito, the DNA is actually wound around a histone. Locus, the location of a gene or sequence of genes on a chromosome, plural of which is Lucci. Lucci. This is pronounced as Lucci. Okay. The location of a gene, so locus. So kung chromosome, ha? Mag-drawing na lang ako. Let's say, for example, this is a chromosome, or ini na lang, sige, palabaon ka na lang, klaro. So, itong punta, ini, chromosome hiya, a short segment of a chromosome. Punta, tapos ini hiya, ada dida itong gene. Now, gene ko itong hiya dida. The location, the exact location of a gene is what we call as locus. Locus. So, damo na nga mga locus, we call it as Lucci or Lucci. Okay. Actually, in Latin, it is pronounced as Lucci. We go to the next term, nitrogenous bases. They are the nitrogen-containing compounds that are components of DNA and RNA. So these are the adenine, the cytosine, guanine, adenine, thymine, and uracil. They are the nitrogen bases in DNA and RNA. Okay, next. Nucleotide, the basic building block of nucleic acids such as DNA and RNA. So nucleotide is the building block of either a DNA or RNA. The building block or the monomer or building block. At kanta, building block ha? Monomer or building block. Monomer or building block of DNA is the nucleotide. DNA is a polymer. So DNA is basically made up of many nucleotides. RNA is basically made up of many nucleotides. Pero kung dito ang protein, protein is a bulk molecule. Protein is made up of amino acids that are joined together. So the amino acid in a protein is the building block of a protein. It is the monomer of a protein, which is a polymer. So, if DNA naman, which is a polymer, itong building block, itong monomer is nucleotide. Okay? Naintindihan niyo? So, sa meron nga DNA, anyway, as we go on with the discussion, you will understand the term better. We go to polypeptides. Inorganic macromolecule made up of amino acids, contains carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. Polypeptide is actually a short segment of a protein. Polypeptide, a short segment of a protein. So, ini naman ng mga short segments, ini naman ng mga polypeptides, i-join nga ni inihira will then form or will then make a protein. Okay? So next, RNA polymerase. RNA polymerase. Anay na, wait na ha. So RNA polymerase is actually an enzyme that RNA polymerase is an enzyme that is used in replication and or in the central dogma of or in protein synthesis. Wala anay nahang. Nahang taksil ko. Okay, thank you. So, kaya kita, RNA polymerase, we go to triplet. Triplet from the word tri, which means 3. Sequence of 3 nucleotide bases on DNA that codes for a specific amino acid. Sa tawag niya, tutulo na nga ng mga nucleotides, we call it as a triplet. Okay, so we go to the history of DNA. Now, the making of or the discovery of a DNA is actually a collaboration of many scientists. So the discovery of DNA or DNA was not discovered by a single person, by a single scientist. No, it was a collaboration of the works of many scientists. Okay. So from 1866 until 1953, hala, 18 pira, almost 1 century. Almost yes, from 1866 to 1953. So again, the discovery of the DNA was or is a collaboration of many scientists, the works of many scientists. But the most famous scientists or DNA, the discovery of the DNA are linked to 2 very famous scientists, Watson and Crick. Watson and Crick. They were the ones who published the structure of the DNA. According to them, according to Watson and Crick, DNA, the structure of a DNA is a double helix. DNA is a double helical structure according to them. But before they were able to discover the structure of the DNA, they have they have to give credit to the previous scientists who also worked on the discovery of the DNA. Okay, so for the history of DNA, just read it. I might include it in one or two of the questions in the summative test. Okay, so we go to the DNA structure and chemistry. What is this all about? So what is DNA? DNA, a very, very common term. DNA. DNA is an acronym for
deoxyribonucleic acid.
Okay, very good. Deoxyribonucleic acid. Deoxyribose for D, nucleic, N for nucleic, and A for acid. A molecule that contains the instructions an organism needs to develop, live, and reproduce. These instructions are found inside every cell. Where can we find it in the cell? Labado. So where can we find DNA in the cell? Where can we find it? In the cell membrane, in the cytoplasm. Very good, in the nucleus. Thank you. So we can find the DNA in the nucleus. But in the case of a prokaryotic cell, since there is no nucleus, we can find it in the, where can we find it? The fourth. Malinaw. In the nucleoid. Very good. Thank you. So we go to the components of a DNA molecule. What is it made up of? One is, who can give me one? Earl Delantar. Give me one component. Answers are already highlighted. Erica Marie. Alison
Nitrogen.
May. Okay. Huh? Nitrogen
Phosphate
base.
group.
Thank you. Phosphate
Phosphate group,
group.
sugar
Another.
group.
Phosphate group,
And the
sugar
sugar
group.
Sugar group.
Okay, so these are the three basic components of a DNA molecule. So the DNA is basically made up of a nucleotide, and its nucleotide contains a phosphate group, a sugar group, and a nitrogen base. Let me draw this for you. Okay, so if this is a phosphate, the phosphate is connected to a sugar, and the sugar is connected to a nitrogen base. Okay? So again, this is the basic component of a nucleotide. A phosphate group which is connected to a sugar, and a sugar is connected to a nitrogen base. Okay? So, hala, masuk ka dito niya. Phosphate connected to a ribose sugar or pentose, not a ribose. Pentose sugar. Sabi nga ni pentose, pera iton pentose, pipera iton corner iton pentose. Pentose, pipera corner. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5, very good. So pentose meaning lilima iton iya. Okay. Lilima iton iya carbon actually. So this is the first carbon. The first carbon is here. 1. Ibang pulahin ko. First carbon is found here, and hindi nga dapit. First carbon, second carbon, third carbon, fourth carbon, and fifth carbon. So there are 5 carbons attached or found in a pentose sugar. In here, first, this is the first carbon where sugar is attached to. We go to the second carbon, the third carbon, the fourth carbon, and the fifth carbon attaches the phosphate group. So this is the sugar, the pentose sugar. Sugar in here. Sugar in here, ha? Okay. There are 4 types of nitrogen bases. We have adenine, guanine, thymine, and cytosine. Again, adenine, guanine, thymine, and cytosine. Now, in a nucleotide, in one nucleotide, please take note of this. In one nucleotide, uusala nga phosphate, uusala nga sugar, nganin uusala nga base. How many types of nitrogen bases are there? Pipira pa daw? Pipira nga nitrogen bases. Pipira nga nitrogen bases. Pipira nga types of nitrogen bases. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, very good. 4. Pero, usala nga base, ito naka-attach sa sugar. In a DNA molecule, let's say for example, this is a DNA molecule. DNA. Now, in a DNA molecule, it can either be adenine, ano? Kung adenine, itong aada nga base in a nucleotide, we call the nucleotide as adenine nucleotide. Now, if instead of adenine, it aada thymine. Thymine. So we call the nucleotide as thymine nucleotide. What do you call to the nucleotide if the nitrogen base present is cytosine? Ano tawag? Class. Ano tawag itong nucleotide? If the base attached to the sugar is cytosine, so what do you call to the nucleotide?
Cytosine nucleotide.
Very good. Who answered that? Identify yourself. Sino po?
Ako po, ma'am.
Sino sila?
Debbie.
Okay, thank you. So cytosine nucleotide. In other words, if guanine is the one attached to the sugar, then we call the nucleotide as ano tawag? As
Guanine
nucleotide. So itong ngaran itong nucleotide depends on the nitrogen base present. Kuha? Ano? Kay masaran kung adenine nucleotide, thymine nucleotide, cytosine nucleotide, uracil nucleotide. Meaning, asya itong iya itong naka-attach dito itong sugar. The name of the nucleotide depends on the nitrogen bases found in the nucleotide. Okay, so, okay, now the 4 types of nitrogen bases, adenine and guanine, in the 4 types of nitrogen bases. Adenine and guanine are called purine bases, while thymine, cytosine, and uracil are called pyrimidine bases. Okay? Thymine, cytosine, and uracil. Adenine, guanine, thymine, cytosine, may aag-anlain hiya ha DNA molecule. While adenine, guanine, uracil, and cytosine are the bases of an RNA molecule. Okay, now, what is the difference between a purine and pyrimidine, Yusef? Give me one difference. Give me one difference between purine and pyrimidine, aside from the bases. Kasi adenine and guanine are both purine, while cytosine and thymine are both pyrimidine. Hala, the answer is there. Aliana? Give what?
Choppy.
Dire na klaro? Choppy na ako? Okay na? Okay na? Okay na itong sound? Okay, so we go back. Give one difference between purine and pyrimidine bases.
The purine bases.
Structure, while the pyrimidine bases have only one.
Okay. So in terms of the ring structure, itong purine ko no, double ring. While pyrimidine is single or has a single ring. Okay? Actually, we have here the difference below. Okay, so Satya. Do you have this in your module? Do you have this one? Okay, we'll come to that later. Okay. So, one difference between purine and pyrimidine bases is the number of ring. number of ring structure in the nitrogen bases. So adenine and guanine have double rings, while thymine, cytosine, and uracil, which are all pyrimidine bases, have only a single ring in them. Now, the order or sequence of these bases determines what biological instructions are contained in a strand of DNA. For example, the sequence ATCGTT might instruct for blue eyes, while ATCGCT might instruct for brown eyes. Okay. Itong atong characteristics is actually based on the arrangement of the nucleotides. A slight change in the sequence will give a big impact to the organism. It can be a big impact in the appearance of the organism, or it can be a big impact on the behavior of the organism. Now, in the example given, para sila A, T, C, G. Pero, nag-ibahira, had 1, 2, 3, 4 on the fifth nucleotide. Here, T, ano sa naman C. With this slight difference, it was able to give a big impact in the color of the eyes. Okay? And in ganung arrangement might instruct for blue eyes, while this arrangement might instruct for brown eyes. Okay? So the complete DNA instruction book or genome for a human contains around 3 billion bases and about 20 genes. Anyway, okay. So, sasyan in here, a very simple diagram of a single nucleotide. So the phosphate group is attached to a pentose sugar, and the pentose sugar is attached to any one of the 4 nitrogen bases. So only one nitrogen base is attached to the pentose sugar. Kung itong pakiana, in what carbon is the nitrogen base attached to the pentose sugar? Hain man hiya, naka-attach. Jillian. Hain hiya naka-attach. Who will answer? Nitrogen base is attached to in what? Okay. Or where in the pentose sugar? Where is the nitrogen base attached to the pentose sugar? In Chad.
Right.
All right. Ipakiana hain hiya naka-attach. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 carbon. Di na carbon here naka-attach. In the first carbon, very good. What about the phosphate group? Haan here naka-attach.
Carbon 1.
In the fifth carbon. Fifth carbon. Kasi 1, first carbon, 1, second carbon, third, fourth, fifth carbon. The first carbon attaches to the nitrogen base, while the fifth carbon attaches to the phosphate group. Number 4. Number 3. So this is now. I don't know if you have this in your module.Eda siguro. So purine. The difference between, in terms of structure, the difference between purines and pyrimidines. Double rings, 1, 2, duha nga rings. Pyrimidines, o sana nga ring. Okay? Adenine. Thymine. Diba? Adenine and guanine. Cytosine, thymine, and uracil are pyrimidines. So these are purines. Adenine 1, 2, 1, 2. So they have double rings. While pyrimidines, the cytosine, thymine, and uracil have only 1 ring. Okay. So here is a tabulated form on the differences, or yes, the differences between purines and pyrimidines. In terms of structure, purines have double carbon nitrogen rings, while pyrimidines have single carbon nitrogen ring with 2 nitrogen atoms. In terms of size, purine is bigger. Kay duha nga itong iya rings. Purine is bigger than pyrimidine. Okay, so what are the nitrogen bases in purines? These are the adenine and guanine. While pyrimidines, these are the cytosine, the thymine, and uracil. Children, are you still there?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Kaya di na kasi na
Ma'am.
bangin waray na ni babati bangin kay dak nasagot ko na po na. Anyway, we go to the structure of DNA. Please listen to this. Now, according to Watson and Crick, DNA is a double helical structure. What is the shape of a helix? Do you know the shape of a helix?
No. As appearance of double-stranded DNA.
Helix. Kumbaga, sa helical ya, twisted, parang twisted. Kumbaga, kung lahiya, kung diriya twisted, punta sugad lahiya, ano, parang ladder niya, parang hagdan na may duduha nga handrails. So this is one handrail, another handrail. In between are the steps. Diba? Malakakitan, masakakitan hagdan, may other steps. So, ini naman hiya an handrail. I-twist mo nga na iton hiya, kung sugaron hiton, okay, it will look like this. Parang twisted ladder. Okay? So the structure of DNA was established by James Watson and Francis Crick in 1953. The basic structure is called a double helix. Double helix. Double because there are 2 strands in a DNA molecule. This is one strand. This is another strand. The double helix describes the appearance of double-stranded DNA, which consists of 2 polynucleotide strands that are anti-parallel to each other. Meaning to say, it runs in opposite direction with the nucleotide bases stacked perpendicularly to an axis. Okay. So mering nga ni appearance of a double-stranded DNA which is anti-parallel. So, ang double-stranded ko, no, ang double-stranded na DNA is anti-parallel to each other. Anti-parallel, meaning opposite to each other. Okay? If this is one strand, and this is another strand, inihira nga duduha nga strands are opposite each other. They are opposite each other. Okay? Okay, assign natin a feature ha. Assign natin a feature. 2 chains. So double strands. Purine opposite a pyrimidine. Now, let's take for example, kung didihan usa nga strand, pagkunta, sugad, usa nga strand, adi naman another strand. If in one strand, it aada nga nucleotide is adenine. Adenine is purine. Now, opposite to the purine is a pyrimidine. Ano? Itong opposite ko no, niya, is a pyrimidine. So if this is purine, it madugtong haiya is pyrimidine. So this is purine, pyrimidine. Adenine is purine. So it madugkot haiya, it maatas sa iya is a pyrimidine. So it will be thymine. Now, if in one strand, guanine, which is a purine, opposite to that will be a pyrimidine, which is cytosine. Okay, opposite ko no, opposite. Another feature, chains are held together by hydrogen bonds. So adenine is connected to thymine with a hydrogen bond or H bond. Hydrogen bond or H bond. Okay? So purine is connected to pyrimidine through a hydrogen bond. Kuha. So guanine is pericytosine by 3 bonds. Tutulok ko no iton hydrogen bonds connecting guanine and cytosine. Tulo. 1, 2, 3. While adenine is paired with thymine by 2 hydrogen bonds. So 1, 2. Diba? Okay, so that is another feature. So another feature is the DNA molecule is anti-parallel or has an anti-parallel orientation. So the 2 chains of a DNA molecule has an anti-parallel orientation, meaning kung dinhi mag-start hiyahin 5', didi ma so 5'. So 5' ito yung orientation is from 5' to 3'. Hindi naman, its orientation is from 5' to 3'. Arot ka rin signon. So mering nga ni 5',
prime. So, marangan 5 prime ha. Meaning, okay, diba? So, didihain pa rin ini, ano pa rin niya, kaparan niya nga carbon, kaparan niya nga carbon class.
5.
5. Meaning, ma-start niya itong 5th carbon. Ano't naka-attach sa 5th carbon? Ano't naka-attach sa 5th carbon class?
Phosphate.
Very good. Phosphate group. Phosphate group. Didi naman, itong ka-red signal itong 3 prime, aada hiya ha 3rd carbon. So 1, 2, 3. Now, itong naka-attach sa 3rd carbon is hydroxyl group. Okay. Surat ko ha. Naka-attach sa 3rd carbon is hydroxyl group. Ha 5th carbon, phosphate. Ha 3rd carbon, hydroxyl group. So this is 1. So this is 5. 5 ini ha. 5. Meaning 5th carbon. 5th carbon. Adi naman hiya 3rd carbon. Okay, 5 prime. Must start yan phosphate. And it will end with a hydroxyl group. So, itong orientation niya is from 5 prime to 3 prime. On the opposite strand, it will start from 5 prime going up. So, it will go to 5 to 3 prime. And it going down to 3 prime rin naman. The adenine on the opposite strand is thymine. If this strand, it has guanine, on the opposite strand, it must be cytosine. So, diri hirap pareho. Ang duduhang strands, diri hirap pareho. They are opposite each other. Please take note of this. The DNA double helix is, the 2 strands in a DNA molecule are opposite each other. They're opposite each other. Okay? So, in terms of orientation, the 2 strands are anti-parallel. In terms of orientation, itong usang strand, if itong usang strand 5 prime to 3 prime, the opposite strand should be 5 prime going up to 3 prime. So, kung di 5, the opposite must be 3. Kung di 3, the opposite must be 5. Diba? Okay. Okay, now, another feature of a DNA molecule is it has a large number of hydrogen bonds. Large number of hydrogen bonds. Kay ano, nga damo ko no, itong hydrogen bonds. Just imagine the number of nucleotides or complementary base pairs in a DNA molecule. Adenine and thymine, piranga hydrogen bonds. Adenine and thymine, how many? How many hydrogen bonds are attached to them? 2. While guanine and cytosine, 3. Takidaw mo manhira. Oo, 3. Sa takidaw mo manhira ng mga guanines, adenines, cytosines, thymines. So a DNA molecule, one feature of a DNA molecule is it has a large number of hydrogen bonds. So another feature is hydrophobic bonding between the stack bases. Hydrophobic. Ano pa daw? Sabi nga na hydrophobic? Hydrophobic.
It's water.
Water.
Hydrophobic. Okay, they hate water. They hate water, meaning they hate each
It's
other.
water.
They hate each other.
It's water.
So similar to the way the order of letters in the alphabet. Okay, now can be used to form a word. The order of nitrogen bases are in the sequence form genes. Masaring kunta itong sentence. Kunta itong sentence made up of words. Masaring kunta. Ari is okay. Let's take, for example, the sentence, Mario is tall, dark, and handsome. So, ini nga sentence is basically made up of words. So, dida hiton DNA, instead of words, nga makakakompleto hiyahin usang trait or makakakompleto hiyan usang na characteristic in a DNA molecule, instead of words, it is made up of genes. Okay? The order of nitrogen bases in a DNA molecule, in a DNA sequence forms genes, which in the language of a cell tells cells how to make protein. Okay? So, a protein, masaring punta, handsome hiya, dark, for example, dark hiya, which is a characteristic, which is a feature of an organism. So, ini hiya nga dark, which is a characteristic, is the one responsible for this is a protein. The one responsible for that is protein. And this protein, to make a protein, it involves a lot of a number of genes. Okay? Genes make a protein. For this protein to come out as a trait, as aga itong individual, because of these genes, the individual will become dark. Because of these genes, the individual will become tall. Because of these genes, the individual will become handsome. Okay? So, in a sentence, it is made up of words. In a DNA, to make a protein, it involves genes. Okay. DNA contains a ton of information and another type of nucleic acid, ribonucleic acid or RNA, translates genetic information from DNA into proteins. Actually, there is a big difference between a DNA and an RNA. DNA and RNA. Doon nag-iibalahirahin letter, diba? Iibahiran letter. DNA. Ano sa naman, RNA. They only differ in this, D and R. But these two nucleic acids are very much different. Okay, so we'll come to that later. So DNA contains a ton, okay, information that's usually very long. If you took all the DNA out of one of your cells and stretch it out, it would be about 6 feet long. So ito usa ko nga DNA in one of your cells, if it is stretched out, it would be about 6 feet long. This is why DNA condenses into chromosomes to fit inside the cell. Really, God loves us. In order for these very long DNA molecules to be accommodated in a very, 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 very small nucleus, what God did was he packed this DNA into a chromosome. Okay. Now, paano niya ginpack? Paano niya pinahalipot, anay? Before packing. So, paano niya pinahalipot? Okay, now, the DNA, the long DNA is wound around a histone. Histone is a protein. So, ginkuan niya, gin-bind ang long DNA didahin mga histones. So, ini, gin-bind niya ang DNA, tapos another histone, another histone, another histone, another histone, and so on and so forth. Okay, now, ini naman nga DNA bind to histone proteins are then packed. Ginupay niya ang pagbutang. Ginupay niya ang pag-arrange in, okay, how? In what way? So he did it this way. So mas masuso pa ito ha, mas masuso pa. Nga unaton nga ni iton hiya, it is about 6 feet long. Okay. Remember, or just imagine the 23 pairs of chromosomes. The 23 pairs of chromosomes. All placed in a very, very small nucleus. Kada usa, when stretched out, is 6 feet long. Takay perahirang tanan, 46 chromosomes in all. How can it be accommodated in a very, very small nucleus when it is not properly packed? Manihiguwa ito niya, diri nga niya mahusto itong usa nga cell. So what God did is he made it to the point na inihiya nga 23 pairs of chromosomes that are properly packed can be accommodated in a very, very small nucleus. Okay? So, how beautiful, how wonderful God is. Okay. So what is the role of DNA in inheritance? Ano ba't gamit niya? Ano ba't iya role in the transmission of characteristics? What is the role of the DNA in the transmission of traits? Unta, ano ang role ng DNA nga napasa ang maupay nga boses ang imutatay nga dahaimo? An intelligence ang imo nanay nga dahaimo, paano hiya napasa? Ano ang role ng DNA in the transmission of traits? Or in the role of, what is the role of DNA in inheritance? Okay, DNA is the genetic information used to make proteins, and it contains the hereditary traits of organisms. There are 2 types, DNA and mitochondrial DNA. Dudo nga klase hat DNA. The nuclear DNA, the DNA that is found in the nucleus, and the DNA that is found in the mitochondrion. Now, the DNA found in the mitochondrion is the DNA or the genes that are found in your mother only. As in the maternal, tawagin na, we actually call it as maternal DNA. So kung iton basis, pag trace iton imo lineage, kunti kang kadiin nga tulin ni David, kung ano imo lineage, kung iton pag trace iton imo lineage, didaan lah hiton kuan hiton kanan imo nanay iton gagamiton mitochondrial DNA. Mitochondrial DNA. Pero kung iton pag-trace iton imo lineage both from your father and mother or from your ancestors, it gagamiton will be nuclear DNA. Okay? So kung gagamiton, ang genes sa imo nanay, ang imo tatay, gagamiton is nuclear DNA. Okay? Kasi, let me put it this way. This is the egg. And this is the sperm. Ano? Okay. Didi, kaya itong nucleus. Okay. Combination of both your ancestors. Inihiya, ada dida itong genes. So, gintampo. Punta ini egg and sperm. So, nahimuhiya nga zygote. Tawag niya zygote. Iton zygote ano or fertilized egg. So didi hiton nucleus. Ada dida ang genes tikang han egg from your mother. Adi ang genes tikang han sperm. Genes tikang han imo father. Okay? So 50% of this 50% han genes han egg aanhi dinhi. Adi naman 50%, another 50% of the genes from your father aanhi dinhi. Okay? So, kung itong gamitan nuclear DNA, it contains the genes both from your mother and father. Na inihiya, itaanhihini, tikanghan, imo lolo, ngahin lola. Dinhi naman itaanhi, tikang liwathan imo lola on your mother's side and lolo and lola from your mother's side. Magtataram pa itong here. Kasya nga, may ada mo features nga pareho itong imo lola on your mother's side, may mo features nga pareho itong imo lolo on your father's side. Because the nucleus is a combination of genes of your ancestors. Ha? Okay. Okay. So you are who you are because of your DNA. You are who you are because of your DNA. If you are talented, the one responsible for that is your DNA. If you're intelligent, then it has something to do with your DNA. If you're left-handed, it has something to do with your DNA also. If you are short, the culprit is your DNA. you have curly hairs and you don't want your hair to be curly, the culprit is your DNA. But if you want your beautiful curly hair, then be thankful with your DNA. Now, the smallest change to it would make you a completely different person, meaning a slight change, a very, very slight change of your DNA could make a different you. Okay? Kasi ka nga, kaya ano nga, ira mga black, ira mga color iton, ira heritak, mga bugto, black. Kaya ano akon white. Kaya ano akon skin lighter it ira. Kaya ano iton akon pupil not as dark as them. Because your DNA changed. And that made you different from your siblings. Okay? Children, are you still there?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
DNA is what makes your dog a dog and not a wolf. Meaning to say, itong arrangement, itong DNA, itong dog, different to the arrangement of the DNA of a wolf. Diba, sa rin ka nga, ma'am, uupat man lang na nucleotides, adenine, guanine, thymine, cytosine, kay ano nga nag-iiriba itong organisms? What makes a dog depends on the arrangement of the nucleotides in a DNA molecule. What makes a carabao is on the arrangement of the nucleotides in a DNA molecule. What made you different from your siblings has something to do with the arrangement of the nucleotides in your DNA molecule. Okay? Okay. So actually, the arrangement of the DNA molecule instructs the kind of protein that will be made inside the cell. Okay, so okay pa? Pwede pa magpadayon?
Sige po.
Yes.
Sige po, ma'am.
We go to RNA. Halipot na lang niya actually, halipot na lang. We go to RNA, the ribonucleic acid. Ribonucleic acid. Another macromolecule essential for all known forms of life. Now, kanina lang kita, diretso na lang kita itong difference between DNA and RNA. Now, in the illustration given, what do you notice in terms of structure? What do you notice to the DNA, the structure of the DNA, and the structure of the RNA? Ang tira pagkakaiba.
DNA
two
and
double-stranded. And RNA is single-stranded.
Okay, very good. So DNA is double-stranded while RNA is single-stranded. And that is one very, very big difference. Another difference in terms of sugar. Sugar, ha? DNA is deoxyribose. Ribose is a sugar. Deoxyribose, while RNA is ribose. Ay matira dida nag-iba. Sige daw, try to look very, very carefully in the illustration. Diin hira nag-iba.
base pair.
Base
DNA
pair.
has a
Look at the
base
illustrations. Look at the illustrations.
Nucleobase.
This is deoxyribose, while this one is ribose. Both are sugar. Deoxyribose is a sugar, ribose is a sugar. Hain dida, hain kaya pagkakaiba.
The composition.
Yes, composition. Where? Diin nga carbon. First, second, third,
2.
fourth.
Second.
Number 2, in the second carbon. Kung kay ano nga gintawag iya nga deoxy. So meron nga ni deoxy meaning de means ano? Deoxy. Oxy means oxygen. De means deoxy. So meron nga deoxygenated. What does it mean?
Not.
Deoxygenated. What does it mean, class?
No oxygen.
Again.
No oxygen.
Very
Less
good.
oxygen.
Thank you. No oxygen. Now look at this. In the second carbon, it has only hydrogen, while in RNA, it has oxygen. And this is hydroxyl. OH. Adi naman hiya, H la. Asa nga tinawag hiya nga, deoxyribose. Meaning, kulang hiyahin oxygen dito is sugar as compared to a ribose sugar. Okay? So that is one difference between DNA and RNA. Aside from the number of strands. Okay? So another difference.
Amount of
Illustration.
nucleobases.
Yes, very good. The nucleotide bases. DNA has thymine, while RNA has uracil.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? So that is another difference. Pero nan atong ginsight nga difference? 3. So this is the third difference. DNA has thymine, RNA has uracil. But both have cytosine, guanine, and adenine. Adenine. So cytosine, guanine, adenine. Okay. So in terms of function, they also differ. DNA is for
long-term storage.
Okay, DNA is for storage. Dinhi gini store iton genetic traits. Dinhi gini store iton mga genes. Diri hiya pwede gumawa sa nucleus. The DNA is stacked. It is imprisoned, sigmunta nala, inside the nucleus. It never goes out. It is trapped inside the nucleus. Yes, thank you for that. While RNA, kay diri man kaada itong gene sa DNA. Paano matransmit itong genes kung itong DNA diri gumawa? What God did, He made RNA, which has another function different to the DNA. Now, if DNA stores genetic information, RNA transfers, copies, and transfers genetic information. Please take this down. Okay, take this down. Isurat niyo itong iyong notes. The DNA stores genetic information while RNA copies and transfers genetic information. Okay, so the RNA is used to transfer the genetic code or the genetic information from the nucleus to the ribosomes to make proteins. Okay, in terms of composition, so natin din mention kanina, sugar, they differ in terms of sugar. Deoxy in DNA, deoxyribose and DNA, ribose and RNA. Okay, parehas, may ada phosphate. In terms of nitrogen bases, may ada niya DNA, adenine, guanine, cytosine, thymine. While in RNA, it has adenine, guanine, cytosine, and uracil. Now we go to base pairing. As ini ang complementary base pairing. Please take note of this. This is very important. Now, in DNA ha, adenine, which has a symbol A, pairs only with thymine, which has a symbol T. A with T, T with A. Guanine pairs only with cytosine and cytosine with guanine. Dire pwede ini adenine with cytosine, thymine and guanine. Otherwise, mutation will occur. Dire pwede ha, adenine pairs only with thymine and vice versa. Guanine pairs only with cytosine and vice versa. We go to RNA. In RNA, adenine pairs only with uracil and uracil with adenine. Kasi walang thymine. So in lieu of thymine, it has uracil. Okay? In RNA, guanine, again, pairs with cytosine and cytosine with guanine. So dinihira nag-diferensya, dinihira nag-iba. Adenine with thymine, adenine naman, adenine with uracil. Now, in terms of propagation, pagpapadamo, DNA is self-replicating. Diba, the interface of DNA makes an exact copy of itself. What phase is that? What phase is that in, what stage is that in interface? Where DNA replicates. What stage is that in interface, class? Where DNA replicates. DNA makes an exact copy of itself. Very good. Thank you for that. S phase or replication phase. Synthesis. S phase or synthesis phase. It is where replication occurs. Now, paano magpadamo itong RNA? Paano papadamo itong RNA? It is the DNA that makes RNA. DNA synthesizes RNA. DNA makes RNA. Okay? This is a lesson in protein synthesis. Okay, and I think we'll have that next week na siguro. Okay. In terms of reactivity, how reactive is DNA? It is not reactive because it is stable. Stable ito hiya. Kay ano nga stable hiya? Because of the double strands. Dire hiya basta mag-change because they are being protected by these strands. Okay? Whereas RNA is single-stranded. So attached to the strands are the nucleotides. Adenine, guanine, uracil, cytosine. Waray nakakaprotect na ira, meaning panlahira parang free, they're open. And because of this structure, they can easily change. So pwede hira kuananhin ibang mga chemicals as that will lead to mutation, that will lead to chemical reaction. As nga reactive, it reactivate RNA because of its structure. Okay? So, in terms of ultraviolet damage, DNA is susceptible to UV damage. DNA is susceptible to ultraviolet rays, ultraviolet radiation, ultraviolet damage. If as much as possible, we don't allow ourselves to stay under the sun for so many hours because of the UV radiation. Okay, so the DNA is susceptible to ultraviolet damage. Because it is susceptible to UV damage, it will have a big effect to our DNA if we allow ourselves to stay under the heat of the sun for a longer time. Okay? Okay, so we go to the types of RNA. Diri na. Okay, halipot na. So, types of RNA. In all prokaryotic and eukaryotic organisms, there are three main classes of RNA molecules that exist. mRNA.
mRNA, tRNA.
Okay. Asa ini itong ira-roll ha? Asa ini ira-roll? The mRNA encodes the amino acid sequence. The mRNA actually copies the message of the DNA, or copies the message in the DNA ngayon, in the DNA. Again, please take this down. The mRNA or the messenger RNA copies the message in the DNA, copies the genetic message in the DNA. The tRNA or transfer RNA, as the name implies, transfers the copied message to the ribosomes. Okay? Kaya kay medyo may mali itong concept. Kung ko na laha i-dictate. Please take this down. Again, mRNA or messenger RNA copies the genetic message in the DNA. tRNA or transfer RNA brings or transfers the genetic message from the nucleus to the ribosomes during translation. Now, the rRNA or ribosomal RNA makes up the ribosomes, the organelles that translate the mRNA. Again, the mRNA or ribosomal RNA makes the ribosomes. The ribosome is basically made up of proteins and ribosomal RNA. Okay? Okay na? Were you able to get it? Nakuha niyo, class?
Yes po.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
What about the Santol?
Ma'am.
Santol class, Santol students?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you able to
Yes,
get it?
ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So RNA is a vital molecule found in your cells, and it is necessary for life. Pieces of RNA are used to construct proteins inside of your body so that new cell growth may take place. Di ba? Masig RT-PCR. Ano't RT in the first place? RT. Masig, hala, nagpa-RT-PCR ka, nagpapaswab nga di ba? RT-PCR, RT-PCR swab. Ano't RT itong RT-PCR? RT-PCR. Virus, remember COVID-19 virus. COVID-19 virus is a ada genetic material ha iya. Is it RNA or DNA? COVID-19.
DNA.
The COVID-19 virus. Ano't ada nga DNA? What is the genetic material in a COVID-19 virus? RNA or DNA?
DNA.
The answer
RNA.
is
RNA.
RNA. So RNA it aada iya. Taka iton RNA diri man hiya basta magre-reproduce. Ano? So itong bubuhaton may ada niya enzyme. We call it as reverse transcriptase. We call the enzyme reverse transcriptase that will convert RNA to DNA. It will become a DNA. So maghihimo yan. Di ba usalan iya strand ng RNA? Usalan iya strand ano? Usalan iya strand, di ba? Usalan iya strand sa RNA. Now, because of reverse transcriptase, dito on RT, PCR. RT is reverse transcriptase, which is an enzyme. Now, because of reverse transcriptase enzyme, this enzyme will make another strand. Para kay double-stranded naman niya, parang DNA na, this COVID-19 virus will then be able to replicate. Magdadamo na hiya. Okay? So, para magdamo, magamitin reverse transcriptase. As ang RT-PCR, kay ano, ginpapadamo, it-aada nga mga RNA. Ginpapadamo iton RNA. Okay? Anyway, so that's it. Panlaan to patalastas. Kay bangin na papausa ka mo. Kay ano nga may RT-PCR? Okay. Now, hala, kami anak ko hindi ipapatrabaho iyo. Okay. Now, for your assignment class, by the way, okay, I will give this as an assignment. This one, activity 3. Activity 3, this will be your assignment. You will do it during your vacant time. And for the answers, send it to my account. Ano? Okay. Okay, so another activity. Write the complementary sequence to the following DNA strand. Diba ito DNA has 2 strands. Let's say, for example, in one strand of a DNA molecule. Now, just a while ago, we talked on the complementary base pairing, where A pairs with, where adenine pairs with thymine, guanine pairs with cytosine. Okay? Now, in your paper, added or did na itong chat box? Copy this strand in your chat box, in the chat box. Copy this strand and then write the complementary sequence of this strand. Naintindihan niyo? Okay. Takamuhin. Okay, example. A. What is the complementary base pair of adenine? What is the complementary base pair of adenine, class?
Thymine.
Adenine. Very good.
Thymine.
So you will write there in the chat box T. Okay? Then continue. At T. What is the complementary base pair of T?
A.
Adenine.
Very good. Adenine. Okay, continue. Continue. Isurat ano niyo ha? I-type ano niyo A, T, C, and so on. And then your answers. Okay? Okay na? Okay, you start now. It's already 4:48. It's almost 5 o'clock. Thank you for bearing with me. I hope you understand. I hope you enjoyed the lesson, and I hope you learned something today. Okay. May I request you to please turn on the camera for the attendance. We got to the first page. Please turn on the camera. Riz, Julia, Marie, Vincent, Angeline. Please turn on your camera. Thank you. Lance, Gabriel, John, Antoinette. Did you learn something today, class?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Did you enjoy
ma'am.
the lesson?
Yes,
Did you enjoy
ma'am.
the lesson? Now for the activity, for the assignment, you can send it to you can PM it. Just PM na lang. One, two, three, smile. Next, we go to page 2. Turn on the camera, Joseph, San, Emmanuel, Francine, Ella, Hazel, Raydel, Erica, Jahara, please turn on the camera. Okay, 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, so thank you and good afternoon. Bye.
Bye po.
Bye, ma'am.
Ma'am.
Bye po.
Bye, ma'am.
Bye, ma'am.
Bye, ma'am.